I've coached age group world champions in their 60s and 70s, and yeah, they're definitely exceptional individuals, but the thing that makes them stand out is the ability just to keep going, keep
Mm.
doing the training, stay healthy month in, month out, year in, year out over all those years. And it slows the inevitable decline. The game isn't won later. The game's being won right now.
Right.
It's important to remember that there is no later. So that's a lesson from athletics. My personal best times, they're nothing. They're times, they're moments. What sticks with me actually from the whole process is the relationships and the experiences and the habits
Mm.
that I was able to build in this lifestyle, in this endurance lifestyle. And that's a really tough thing for a kid to have to deal with in their teens, in high school, when they got all this other stuff going on in their social life. They're trying to figure out who they are in the larger world. So these high pressure parents are actually setting their children up for failure, not for success.
Gordo Byrn, it's been a long time. I think 6 years since I was there with you in Boulder in your wonderful home. You've traveled the world and finally settled in. It must be a top spot if you chose it.
Yeah, my wife Monica tells me that I'm very fortunate that she grew up here and this is where we ended up.
Oh, I didn't know that. Incredible.
Yeah, she's a true local.
Yeah, she was cool and fit and hip way before Boulder became the hotspot.
Yeah,
She
yeah,
gets to sit
Boulder
back and
High,
watch it. Yeah.
the whole thing.
I think we should start with your background when we're talking about how you've lived all over the world, but especially that amazing career track with such disparate and extreme, checkpoints on the map. So I'd love for you to take us through that, and then winding up how we got here to your current endeavors,
Mhm.
especially the blogging.
Okay. Born in Canada and spent most most of my school years in Vancouver and then started moving east. So the first move was to Montreal, which is where I went to university. And then after university, I ended up in London, England, worked there for 4 years doing private equity and investments, which was great. And then I had the opportunity to move out to Asia and get promoted at quite a young age to partner in my private equity firm. And I was there for 6 years full time and then an additional year kind of working part time when I took a leave of absence, doing a bit of consulting for them. And the reason I took that leave of absence was I had started doing triathlon and enjoyed it a lot. Absolutely loved the training, the project management nature of it, the whole deal. And I just wanted to take a summer, 2 months. I took 2 months off, came to Boulder, lived in the mountains above Boulder, and trained for a race called Ironman Canada in Penticton. And I was racing as an amateur, had a great race, second amateur, and went back to my job and negotiated a 1 year leave of absence. And I left and went down to Australia, New Zealand that winter, and I never came back. I created a completely new life built around fitness and athletics, and I maintained consulting roles using the skills that I had built up in the previous 10 years in finance and private equity, which was great income. But I managed to figure out a way to cover my basic expenses just by being a coach. I never, one of my favorite books is your book, Can You Really Make a Living Doing This or doing that? And the answer for me was no, I could not. I could make a little bit of money, but on a per hour basis, I was less than minimum wage. But people always connected with my story, and I was able to create a nice niche coaching business, helping fast and aspiring age groupers qualify for Kona, qualify for world champs. And we had a lot of success with that. And I kept that going for quite a while with a couple coaching partners. And then ultimately, I decided to focus on my family, stepped away from racing for 10 years. I've got 3 kids, and they're now at the age where I've got time coming back into my life. And I've decided to get back into shape. Not that I was particularly out of shape when I was focused on the family, but I think both you and I, when we say get into shape, we mean something different probably than the general person walking around. We're talking about competitive shape, and I want to see what kind of level I can get back to. Really looking to my late 50s, early 60s. It's going to take me a while because of the length of my break, but I'm patient and
Mm.
I love the process. Still do. It's a lot of fun.
You might be facing some competition that's on this similar life arc where all of a sudden they have a bunch of time and resources and they're going to be faster than the guys in the 30s and 40s who are busy raising kids and working at a career.
Yeah, I mean, I left it because it was too difficult. It was too much time. The races are on the weekend, which is when you don't have any coverage for the kids because they're not in school. So it just, the whole thing was just becoming really stressful for me. And I didn't like where it was going to take my family.
Hmm.
And I was fortunate. I had way more athletic success than I ever expected. And so when I stepped back, I mean, even when I'm not in competitive shape, I'm still way better. I'm a much better athlete, much stronger than I was as a kid, than I was in my early 20s when I was completely out of shape and overweight. And so I really took those lessons from sport and I've incorporated them into my core life, completely separate from competition and racing. And that's been the long-term value
Hmm.
of changing my life and going down that competitive athlete path.
I guess we should reflect back on that career because it was quite intense. As you say, it was high income, well paying. So it's easy to get immersed into that type of lifestyle. You write about this nicely, where all of a sudden your standard of living is so high that you're trapped in your high paying career and neglecting other parts of your life. In your case, your fitness, which is so amazing because then you turn the coin completely over and became one of the fittest people on the planet. But I wonder what it was like, immersed in that career and then being able to extricate where you thought yourself it was only a summer off and then a year off. And then I guess the further you got away from London and the ringing bells of the exchanges and all that, you realize, what the hell am I doing there or something?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I think many people in finance and in the corporate lifestyle um, make a mistake in that they view a spending as quality of life, and the ability to acquire goods and services as having a good quality of life. So I asked myself, what is living well? And living well for me today and then, this is around the time of my 30th birthday. Living well does not include um, spending a ton of money. And I realized when I left Hong Kong initially for 2 months to come to Colorado and live up in the hills, was that the spending that I was doing wasn't buying me anything. I wasn't benefiting from the money that I spent. And I very quickly saw when I moved down to New Zealand, I ended up in Christchurch. And when I was down in New Zealand, my cost of living was 1/20th of what I was spending in Hong Kong. So, 5 cents on the dollar, my annual budget just collapsed. And it didn't collapse because I was living frugally or denying myself anything. It shrank because I was just focused on what I wanted to do and the way I wanted to live, which at the time was a whole lot of swim, bike, run. It was being outside every day with my friends and being part of a different type of community, the athletic community, the endurance community, which is a great group of people, highly motivated, fit, very healthy. And it really brought out the best in me. And that is what made it so sticky. That's why I wanted to stay with that lifestyle. I could tell it was good for me. I felt good. And at the same time, I was just getting better and better and better at the racing. And I think when you're on that upswing, and if you're somebody that does have the potential to be very, very good at something, the first 3 years, certainly, you're getting better every, I don't know, 3 to 6 months, you're
Mm.
stepping up. And you don't start to plateau until you've been doing it for me, it was probably, around 5 years. And then it starts to get very challenging in terms of eking out those additional gains. And it
Mm.
takes a lot of work over a long time to get to the very top. But you can get, if you've got potential for something, you can get to the top relatively quickly. And by quickly, I mean like 3 years, 1,000 days. You'll definitely make quite a bit of progress if you're able to stick with it day in, day out, and you enjoy the process and have good mentors. And that's what I had in New Zealand. I had some very good mentors as well as training partners, a limited number of training partners, one or two guys at a time. And they were totally into it as well. And we had we had a virtuous circle where we would just help each other keep it rolling day in,
Mm.
day out. When we were encouraging each other, we weren't trying to kill each other in training.
Mm. And you were coming to this, it's not like you were picking up triathlon again after your youth years. This was kind of a new thing to you, and you weren't this old time athlete picking it up again. It was just a hobby that you fell upon. Do you think you had a natural inclination and talent for it, and also that work ethic from the business world was able to be redirected to bring you the great success that you had in a relatively short time?
So this is the key part, I think, of the story. I started swimming when I was 30 years old. So when if somebody's listening to this and they're thinking, well, I'll never learn to swim because I wasn't a swim kid. My advice would be, I don't think so. I think you can learn physical skills late in life. I've done it more than just swimming, but I went from zero in swimming to a 20-minute 1,500 long course meters. And it took a lot of work to do that. Um, and I got my Ironman swim down to about 50 minutes, which is good for somebody that started from scratch.
Good for
Um,
anybody.
yeah. Well, my
It's up
wife's a
near the front, people. It's up near the front.
my wife's a 46, but she let out in Kona, so she's a different level. And that she benefited because she could swim with the men back when the men and women raced together. But it's not just swimming. I've done it with skiing. After during this 10-year break, I had to take care of my family. We had a few years where we wanted to learn how to ski as a family, and I was able to apply the same principles of endurance to a different area, skiing, which is just swimming is touch the water a lot. Skiing is touch the snow a
Mm.
lot and get yourself some expert technical instruction and focus on improving your skills and you get ski fit or swim fit while practicing those skills. It's the same principle. It works great. And I know you've picked up other things later in life too and become very proficient at them. So it's not just my story. If you look for it, it's out there. You can do it. And I think that was a key lesson. And it's broader than just athletics. What I like to say is I talk about hidden talents. And if you give yourself exposure to a wide range of things that you're interested in and
Mm.
that engage you, quite often you'll find, wow, it turns out I have talent in this area. And then you get all the positive feedback from the world because you've latched onto something where you're talented and you can just ride that curve. And it's a really effective way for two things. It's effective to cope with aging, to develop mastery in other areas, maybe not necessarily physical areas, but it's also a great way to cope with the transitions you might have in life. And for those of us that were elite athletes, at some point, we will not be doing elite performances. And what a lot of those athletes do is they move laterally. So they move into a new sport. So in my case, I went laterally into long distance mountain biking, the Leadville 100. So it's a race that suited me back then in my early 40s. It's very high altitude and it's a long event, and it's way easier than an Ironman because you get a lot of rest on the downhills and you don't have to run a marathon at the end of the day. It's a challenging course, but it's not the same as running a marathon when you're tired. And so I really enjoyed it. And so that's something that I would recommend to people too, is if you're struggling in your main pursuit, consider, well, maybe I can get more satisfaction from a lateral move, picking up something that'll challenge me in new ways. So I did it with mountain biking, done it with skiing. And I've, frankly, I mean, it wasn't very enjoyable, but it's what I did with parenting and fatherhood. And it's like, I got these 3 kids and I want to do the right thing for them, but I'm going to have to upskill myself because I'm lousy at being a father. I mean, nobody's great out of the gate. I think some people may have had the benefit of an exceptional parent as a role model that trained them, or exceptional teachers. And the teachers are really what helped me. The preschool teachers for my kids, I would have short meetings with them, and I'm like, "What are you doing at the preschool? What are your techniques?"
Wow.
And they would help me. And so then the kids are getting reinforced with the same techniques at school, at home, and they benefit too. And then again, it's the whole idea of this virtuous circle where and the two key things are really de-escalation. Teach yourself and teach your kids to de-escalate situations, and then persistence. Don't give up. You'll have bad days, you'll make mistakes, and you just stick with it. And that's really what the kids need from us. They need us to be engaged, persistent, and teaching them to de-escalate situations so it doesn't spiral out of control and nobody's having fun anymore.
I guess when you perceive yourself as lousy parent, it could be that someone who's highly focused on an extreme endurance athletic performance at the elite level is not inherently not going to be an excellent parent, because their life is too focused on these all-consuming peak performance goals, whether it be career in the finance world, if that was your time, or whether you're athlete. And then as you write nicely, you had to kind of put the old Gordo aside and become selfless, tireless, and all these things where the endurance athlete needs their sleep, they need their rest, they better have it quiet at nap time. All these things are thrown out the window all of a sudden as you're thrust into this new challenge. And to your credit, having a desire to do it right rather than squeeze all these puzzle pieces into, force them into the puzzle and keep everything going at some level, probably mediocre on many fronts if you're trying to squeeze too much into your life.
My brother has my brother says it's the same Gordo, different game. So my core personality has not changed.
He wants to win the parenting game. He wants to be the gold star at the preschool, best parent of the month. Yeah.
It's painful not to do it right. And that was a big motivator for me to change my approach with my family life in my early 40s, because when you're living with your spouse and 2 babies and a preschooler, it's too painful to shut them out and not do the right thing for them. And so I made the decision. I was like, you know what? I'm going to change the game. And I'm not going to be trying to compete at an athletic level. I'm going to try and take this world-class attitude and apply it to family life and see what I can learn and see how good I can get. And it was awful. It was not fun. It was misery many days. But as an elite athlete, that's not a problem. I
Mm.
I I know I can handle that, and it's the higher purpose, and you need it. You need a higher purpose, and there's no higher purpose than doing the right thing for your children. It's ingrained in all of us, and to turn away from that purpose would have I would have had to either ignore or admit that I wasn't the man that I thought I was, and I didn't want to do that. And so I just said, you know what? I'm just gonna lean into this,
Mm.
and I'm gonna get some coaching, just like athletics, and I'm gonna just iterate. I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna do it every day, and I'm gonna get better at it. And sure enough, I did. And by the time you get better at it, the kids have grown up, and you're not dealing with preschools anymore. I got a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 14-year-old, and I've been hiking with them and doing all kinds of stuff with them, and they're a lot of fun to hang out with. And we've got this relationship that we've established over their entire lifetime. And so I have a very deep credibility with them, and we have a bond with each other, and they're fun to hang out with. At the same time, I'm getting older, my energy's going down, their energy's coming up, and we meet. And I'm at that point now where
Mm.
it's great. We can do fun stuff and mix it up, and they have different interests. um and but we have different things that we can do together. And again, this period is temporary too, because our oldest is
Mm.
14. She's a really keen swimmer, and I can already see her life tracking different from me. I swim, but I don't really like sitting in the bleachers. I prefer to be in the pool. And so I'm not sort of a swim parent that's just hanging out following my kid around. I like to be more active with the kids.
So you talk about the same Gordo, different game. And my reflection as a former extremely competitive athlete and then a parent afterward is I don't know if those personality attributes easily transfer over. You talk about, hey, you went and got a coach just like you did when you were an athlete. You leaned into it just like you did when you're an athlete. But in many cases, I think presiding over the mess and the uncertainty and all those things that are different than what you needed to do as an athlete, where you needed your schedule and all these different attributes in place, that seemingly requires a big adjustment in your mentality and in your competitive drive or whatever it is. I'm teasing about you wanting to get the gold star at the preschool, being the top parent, but I think we have to let go of a lot of these deep personality attributes that made us competitive in the competitive setting and realize that parenting's different.
Very different. No positive feedback. So for many years, for me, you can't do a benchmarking test.
Mm.
Nobody gives me a performance review. Not getting paid. Nobody's giving me a raise. Kids yell at me every night when I'm putting them to bed. It's a very different environment. But if you look for the good moments and you look for the positive feedback, it's there. And I'll give you some examples. I took a lot of pictures of the good moments. And, sometimes I just scroll the iPhone and be like, well, I'm miserable now, but I look pretty happy in some of these pictures, and the kids are always having a blast. And that's something that I would say too. We have very happy children because children want to be with their parents. And so we were fortunate in that sense. So we get the positive feedback from the happiness of the kids. The other thing is, if you're doing a good job, the people in your community will tell you your children will be well adjusted and fun to be with. And the way they are at home is not necessarily the way they are in the world. Likewise with siblings, the way siblings are in the house is definitely not the way siblings are out in the world.
Mm.
So you need to watch that you're not assessing yourself based on the toughest parts of your day. And then you also, I think, need to be careful that I had another parent, a mom, to give me a tip when I was having a particularly rough stretch. And she said, look, you got to stay back from the edge. And what I took that to mean is put yourself in environments where your family's seeing your best side, your best environments. So for me, that is hiking in a forest,
Mm.
taking the kids out and just going for a walk, getting out of the house and just exploring nature and hanging out. And they love it. They've done it from a young age. Now, and that's an idea, is focus on what's my best environment. And if you pay attention, you'll also notice, well, what's my worst environment? What is the environment where if I'm going to lose it, I'm going to be in that environment? For me, it's in a car where I'm having
Mm.
to concentrate with people around me, with the kids making background noise. And even if they're happy, it rattles me because I'm not great at that whole multitasking thing. So I'm having to drive and not listen at the same time. And it just wears me out. So I need to reduce my worst environments. And then my family sees a better side of me. Now, this is related to why I was stepping back from the training, because when you're training, so much physical energy goes into the training. You really have much left afterwards. You just want to sit in a chair, put yourself back together and recover to get ready for the next session. And that's a necessary part of being an elite athlete. The simplicity and the single-mindedness of most of the days in your year. A family situation or even a human situation, any interaction between people is not like that. It's a completely different, you touched on it, the skill set. It's a completely different skill set. The skill set is the ability to understand what's going on with other people and just have some back and forth and being much more flexible. Well, a world champion athlete is not flexible. They have their session at their time and their goals. And if you want to come to that session to get a little bit of that champion aura on yourself, you're going to be doing their session. They're not interested in calling audibles. And that's why they tend to train in small groups, small
Mm.
communities with very reliable partners. And I wasn't like an Olympic champion or anything, but I very much embraced that philosophy. And I did have to completely let go of that philosophy. And that's part of the reason why I stopped racing, because the races were nudging me to back into those behaviors. And now as I'm coming back, what I've done is I've sort of put in a system of monitoring my fatigue and my readiness to do the same kind of thing, to keep me from going too deep and getting too tired and not being able to address my family, which is much more important in the larger scheme of things, particularly at this stage in my life.
So you're picking and choosing all these wonderful attributes of being a dedicated competitive athlete with goals and enjoying the process so much, but you're making an effort to throw away some of the things that, I have all these reflections and misgivings now about these behavior patterns and sort of mindset and lifestyle attributes that really don't serve anyone else and don't even serve the individual in a way. And I'm talking about just the misplaced competitive intensity and the over becoming overly consumed with the results and the competitive experience. So is that kind of, you see it that way, that
Well,
you want to get back and you want to bring that heat back and that intensity to the Gordo game, but without the baggage, I guess.
well, there's two things there. Um, most most any individual with a type, we did, so in our private equity business, we did personality testing. They ran a bunch of tests on me before I was going to leave, because they wanted to find out what they should look for in somebody trying to replace me.
Wow.
And so it was a very competitive group of people. Finance tends to attract those types of people. Now, I was at the most competitive side of this competitive group of people. So I was extreme type A. So if if I'm not competing like in terms of athletics, I'm going to be competing on something else. And the feeling I had back then in my 20s and 30s was competing on all fronts at all times. And if you're somebody that has that feeling, I would say choose your game with intention, because you can compete at some very bad habits, drugs and alcohol, compete with number of sexual partners, and just compete at being a total head casing and just crazy. So for me, athletics gave me a very positive way to compete. I still overdid it at times, but overdoing it with bike volume or swim volume or something, you're just making yourself tired, and eventually you could make yourself sick. But it takes a ridiculous amount of exercise to actually overtrain yourself, and I did that a couple of times. But for most people, it's not a thing. So if you choose your game with intent, I think that's very important. Now, roll forward. Now I'm older. I'm getting back into the competitive game, but the game's totally different. If we look at these times at world championships now, we're the elite men are trying to go 7:35 in Kona now. Okay. And if that is, well, let's put that in context. To win an Ironman these days, you have to have the fitness to break the world record when I was racing. So a world record time from 15 years ago is just a standard time now. So the competitive field has greatly increased. So, but the competitive field from 55 to 65 has not increased by the same amount. And that's probably because most people are far more sensible than maybe me, in that they don't necessarily want to do that much exercise at this age. And so I look at the physiology required, I look at the time commitment required, and I'm like, this looks really enjoyable to me. This looks reasonable. I can be competitive with my friends that are still racing at a high level, and I can enjoy the process, and the time commitment is not all consuming. And so in some ways, as you get older, it gets easier, because as well, eventually your kids grow up, your life's going to simplify, and athletics can help fill the void that many people feel in that empty nest phase of their life. And it also, done correctly, metabolic fitness is very important for healthy aging. Metabolic fitness, as well as maintaining your strength and your muscle mass. So if you do it right, it fits into all my goals for successful aging. So, it's really quality of life across my lifespan, as well as being engaged with my community, my friends. My wife's an athlete too, being engaged with my spouse. So it all kind of fits in now, but it didn't fit in when I had young kids.
And you're saying to be an elite 55 plus racer, you don't have to risk your health and devote your entire day like you did when you were an elite. So it can be a nice, convenient fit. It's easier. I like that.
Yeah, but John Helleman says there's no such thing as a old elite. There's just elites. He's a bit tough on me with that.
Yeah. I mean, one of my goals in the future is the 95 plus high jump world record, and the world record is 0.97 meters. For those of you not familiar with the metric system, that's about 3 feet, and so it literally entailed jumping into bed when you're 95 to break a world record in the high jump, which is easier than the current world record of 8 feet for the elite. So I like that, just hanging in there and
it's
making it
competitive.
fit.
Yeah, so it's if you're healthy and you've got good mobility and you're feeling good, then that gives you an option to ramp it up for a couple months to prepare for an event. And I think that's probably a better way of looking at it, because I think what would happen to most people is if they get this single-minded devotion, like, this you're just on this laser beam track and you're in your 50s, you're going to wreck yourself. You need to be taking this holistic long-term view of developing yourself in many different ways. You know, if your metabolic fitness, your strength, your mobility, you need to be athletic and balanced. And then while you're doing that, you can build up towards these events. And if you can do the training for the events, it'll be prudent to do the events. If you can't, well,
Mm,
hopefully you're old enough. You're not going to do what we used to do when we were younger, is like, well, we're just going to sign up for it and figure it out
mm.
later how I'm going to get through it. I mean, I think that would be a particularly bad idea after 50.
Uh, well, it's a bad idea to try to short circuit the process of, being patient. And here I am recovering from my heel surgery because I sprinted too enthusiastically over the previous couple years and got myself into the dead end of the doctor's office. And it's such an illuminating example of like, hey, this is the kind of stuff I did all the time when I was a young athlete. I mean, they teased me in the doctor's office because I said, how long has this heel been bothering you? And I said, oh, around 9 months. And they're like, 9 months? What are you talking about? Are you serious? And I'm like, sure, I have all kinds of stuff that bother me for 9 months or 19 months that's niggling here, niggling there. But they thought that was an extremely long time to be dealing with an injury. So I had to, re-educate myself on, hey, what are we doing out here? And the first priority being that stability, mobility, flexibility, being able to just show up rather than be on the sideline is goal number one. Forget about your racing time and beating the competitor in the next lane.
Yeah, stay in the game. That's I've coached age group world champions in their 60s and 70s, and yeah, they're definitely exceptional individuals, but the thing that makes them stand out is the ability just to keep going, keep
Mm,
doing the training, stay healthy month in, month out, year in, year out over all those years. And it slows the inevitable decline. And I think that's key. The other thing that I would say if somebody's listening is to remember, particularly if you're a new athlete or a strong athlete that's coming to a new sport,
mm,
or a veteran athlete, an older athlete, ignore the optimal program. Ignore it. It will hurt you and wreck you. You need to be very conservative in terms of your approach and very patient, because a lot of your instincts are going to work against you. So, this desire to get fast and do high intensity training, your body's not ready to support it. The other thing is the approach that you're going to use, particularly if you study elite athletes, is going to be completely inappropriate in an amateur athletic environment. You have to use very small doses, and your dose and the intensity that you use needs to be scaled down to where you are at the moment rather than where you want to be. So it's going
mm.
to be a little bit of quickness that you're going to incorporate rather than a whole lot of searing, very painful training. So I point people towards quickness, strength, and stamina being the three foundations that they want to be thinking about in their program. And the quickness, in terms of, just to show, like, what do I mean by a small amount of quickness? Take 1% of the time you spend training in a week, and you can spend that on quickness. And that's going to be enough. That'll be enough to actually give you a dose. And it's not going to wreck you. And you'll need to become dedicated to daily mobility. And what I recommend there is just a 10-minute habit.
Mm,
Establish the habit first. And if you establish the habit, you're going to feel better in your body. And when you feel better in your body, it'll be easier to extend those sessions, because you're going to be starting to get the payoff. But at first, you're probably going to be so stiff and rigid. I mean, you'll be thinking, why am I even doing this? Well, you're doing it because you got to loosen up your body. And I had that leaving finance. I remember the first time I got a massage, it felt like on my traps, it actually felt like there were golf balls inside my traps from all those years of desk work. And that was the wonderful thing about triathlon, swim, bike, run. It really loosened my whole body up. Combined with, as an elite, I did a lot of yoga, all winter and spring down in New Zealand. I do 3 90-minute sessions, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, as part of my program. But that I don't have that kind of time in my week now. So what I do is I do a minimum of 10 minutes a day, and that can keep me going, and it can let me continue to exercise while I'm dealing with niggles. So
Mm.
use active recovery as opposed to using a total rest approach, which doesn't do my mental health any good. I mean, it must not have been fun coming back from the surgery. How long were you shut down?
Well, I'm still not running. They said 3 to 6 months of no running, but I could do just about everything else, cycling and strength training and lifting heavy weights and all that.
Oh,
So
that's good.
it's nice to you have to find a place to redirect that energy and
Yeah.
work toward your healing. You talk about making lateral moves, which is such a great suggestion, and I think just on that topic, I think it's also important to embrace the idea that you may have, you know, achieved your peak when you won the Ultraman World Championship at whatever age, at the most ideal event that anyone could come up for you, which is that crazy 3-day double Ironman distance event. And then anything that's off that, maybe you're not the most adapted Leadville mountain bike guy, but you're going to be out there and be a member in the pack. And I'm certainly not adapted to high jump as I was for Olympic distance triathlon, but just embracing the challenge and enjoying the process, even if it's not your signature event. I think that's a wonderful skill or mindset to try and adopt, especially as we age, and try to find things that light us up without
Mm.
succumbing to the measuring, judging forces that, gee, this is never going to match what I did in my signature event.
Yeah. And I mean, I had 10 years off running. I tried to get back twice, and I just kept getting hurt.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until I embraced a different approach, and it's really simple. It's just no back-to-back runs
Hmm.
and 10 minutes of mobility every single day. That's the fundamental thing. And whereas what I was doing before was lots of little runs, but
Hmm.
I was never giving myself that time to recover between the runs, even if they were short, like 2-mile runs. And as a result, just kept getting hurt. So I think sometimes if you can persist and get some advice in terms of different things to try, if there's a listener that has a passion for something, you can get back. I mean, I've been running pain-free since July 1st. I've had little niggles, but I'm past that initial
Hmm.
streak. And it's been great to actually bring that back into my program. I always really enjoyed running, and I missed it when it was gone.
Yeah, a lot of people move away from it over the timeline of life, but I think it does have those weight bearing, bone density benefits. It's a fundamental human skill. Even going fast and sprinting, I would recommend for anyone, especially for fat reduction benefits and just aging gracefully and maintaining that ability. But
Mm,
yeah, it takes a lot of prep work. And another thing you wrote about was the pendulum between strength and endurance, which I feel like I've been
yeah.
struggling with, and trying to maintain these disparate skills seems to be in some ways it seems impossible to me, like trying to become really competent at 400 meters high jump and then also be maintaining endurance for things like speed golf or just general endurance to be able to go out for a couple hours. Might be too daunting. I don't know. Tell me about this pendulum.
So I with these here's what I recommend people do. And first off, you have to acknowledge that in life you can't have it all, and you're going to have to make choices. And there's a cost to everything, and there's a trade-off between things. And you have to acknowledge that. So it's just the way it is. If you want to be an exceptional parent or an exceptional athlete or an exceptional CEO, exceptional whatever, there's going to be costs in other parts of your life. Many of these costs are hidden. You'll never see them.
Mm.
The cost of I call it the cost of the status quo. But let's come back to the original question, which was this pendulum. And with strength, I think, well, strength and endurance, I think it's important for athletes to recognize and acknowledge that they're not the typical person in terms of strength and endurance. So when I am not strong, I'm still strong relative to my community. When I am not in race shape, I'm still fit and healthy relative to my community. And so you need to establish a reasonable baseline in terms of your expectation. And I would say the reasonable baseline would be health rather than performance. And so that would be, so evaluate yourself based on a healthy baseline and choose your reference set carefully. You know, if your friends are a bunch of total nutcase ultra athletes, you might think that you have no stamina when actually your stamina is pretty good. And this focus on health is one way that I find you can actually get through to somebody, is think about, well, look, what is my healthiest training weight? What is a healthy amount of strength? Like, how strong do I need to be in life? I mean, you know, can I pick up my kids? Can I pick up my grandkids? Can I move my luggage around an airport? You know, these types of functional activities, functional strength, functional mobility. And then over top of that, you're going to have these goals, which arrive for whatever reason. You might want to dig into, you know, where your goals are coming from. It's usually community, environment, reference set, or it might be some sort of unfulfilled need. You know, I want to win races because I want respect or admiration, and that you can get that other places. You don't need a race. So, but with these strength and endurance things, what I recommend people do is touch them every so often. And what I mean by that is you think about the seasons of your fitness year, and you're going to have a strength season, a mobility season, a longer endurance season. And so they're coming in and out across the year, and you're never getting too far from them, but you never go like all in. And that was a mistake I made in the pandemic with my own training. I went all in with strength and work capacity training. And so I spent most of the lockdown period and then the period after. So if we say that pandemic period, let's call it about 2 years, very much training like a CrossFitter, if you know what I mean, work capacity stuff, a lot of cleans, a lot of body weight exercises, occasionally going really heavy in the gym. So I swung too far towards that strength and power athlete, and I look great. You know, people that say you can't gain lean body mass in your 50s, not my experience. I got stronger, I felt more muscular, my clothes fit better. It was great, and felt good. Really enjoyed it, but my metabolic health suffered. And when my metabolic health suffered, the way it appeared was it appeared because I would get really tired going hiking with my wife or my son. Both of them love to hike, do long hikes. And they can't tell because I'm an experienced athlete. I kind of keep my mouth shut when I'm suffering. But I'm like, wow, I'm just like so worked. And I couldn't figure out why. And the reason was I didn't have this low end endurance fitness, which had really been a strength of mine as an elite, and then subsequent to being elite, and it lingered for a long time. But I had detrained that aspect. The pendulum had swung too far away from endurance. And really, what last year was about was bringing back that endurance focus so I could get that metabolic health and I could enjoy my life with my family more. I could be kind of the athlete I used to be in terms of having some stamina and being able to not only do long events, but enjoy these longer hikes and climbs. And it's been a process. It's ongoing. But I've had, so I started at the end of April, and honestly, I didn't have anything to show for it until December. It's a relatively long time horizon. That's kind of something you got to bear in mind. You might not be getting a whole lot of feedback in your first 6 months, and you just got to stick with it and trust the process.
Now, concurrently, do you feel like you've lost your edge in the strength, power, CrossFit performance categories?
So yeah, so this is so I'm, I eat my own cooking as a coach, as a writer, as an athlete. And what I mean by that is I do what I tell people to do. I don't hold myself out as, a the coach that's sitting in a chair and not looking too healthy and just telling everybody what to do because they're an expert and they happen to work with a lot of fast people. I actually do it. And so I noticed I did a set of squats in December, 2 by 25. And I got really sore and I was surprised. And I was like, wow, there's information in this soreness. And so right now I'm in a build up, build back kind of strength phase. And it comes back very quickly for me because I didn't let it go too far. So I didn't do much strength training across the fall and the summer, and that's why I was getting sore. But it's not like I took 2 years off the gym. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get back in touch with my strength, and the gains come back quickly if you never get too far away. And so my leg press is already going up pretty good. And so I suspect that by early February, it'll be time to kind of hang up the strength focus for a little bit and get back to the endurance focus. Specifically, I'm going to try and increase my run frequency and see if I tolerate that, because by then I'll be getting close to enough months that hopefully my body's ready to do a bit more running and just see how that happens. And then in the late spring, the weather gets good and we start adding back some longer bike riding.
Mm.
So it's very much a traditional approach a triathlete might do, with a strength focus in winter, then a run frequency focus, and then a balanced focus with the overload being done on the bike. It's worked for athletes that I coached over the years, both veterans and younger athletes.
It seems like this real talk here is countering some of the imagery we get from the today's fitness influencer who appears to be trying to master everything. And you see these popular challenges on social media, like, can you deadlift 500 pounds and then go run a 5-minute mile, or things relative to that, or big guys who are showing that they can also run a marathon. And certainly they're fantastic fitness specimens. And, Mark Bell, my buddy, is training for the Boston Marathon, which will be an amazing achievement when he finishes, because he was a world-class power lifter with these crazy, squatting 870 pounds and deadlifting 1,000 pounds and what have you. Of course, that was a different era, but trying to have it all in real time seems like you're hitting up against this barrier that you describe.
Yeah, it's fun to watch. I don't think it's particularly good for anyone's health. I think the extremes might be places to visit, but you don't want to move in. I think I've done some extreme things in my
Mm-hmm.
time, and I mean it was okay. I guess I got some value from it, but it's if you hang out there as a destination, something's going to go wrong. I also think, it seems obvious to me, but carrying around a lot more lean body mass than you need
Mm.
is your body doesn't want to be that big. And so one of the things I don't think it's very good for our health. And I think if you dig a little deeper into mortality, you'll see you're not going to be able to demonstrate that you're getting any benefit. Although it is kind of fun to be jacked. But and that's, by the way, that it's related to why extreme exercise I don't think is particularly healthy. And when you're that large, like when you're doing these huge weeks, you have to eat a
Mm.
tremendous amount of food, and you're placing your body under nutritional stress because it's always having to oxidize, it's always having to process the calories, it's always having to produce energy. And there's an inherent stress in size, but also in high activity. And so I think at the extremes, and most people never need to worry about this. I mean, hardly
Mm.
anybody's ever going to do a 35-hour training week. But if somebody is listening and you do have a tendency to be really extreme, both in volume or in size or in intensity, you're not really doing yourself any favors. So if you can find a way to use the ultra training to work through some of these emotional issues that you have that are driving this compulsion towards size, towards exercise. This is something that I was able to do very successfully. I used the bike volume to work through a lot of these emotions that I had from my childhood, from all these different things, from living in a big city, from my life history. And you can get to a calmer spot, a spot where you're more centered, a spot where you're less compulsive. It can be a very positive experience to visit these extreme places if you get something from it. If you just get wrapped up in the extreme nature, I think it can work against you. And how do you know it's working against you? Your body's going to start to fall apart.
Mm.
So if you're a power lifter, you're going to compress your spine, your joints are going to give out on you. If you're an endurance athlete, you're gonna start really just consuming your body. You're gonna move into ill health. And then getting your health back can be a way to kind of exit when you've gone too far. And I have seen a few of my friends go too far, and it's sad because the exercise component, the strength training component, is the best part of their life. And it's a part that gives them a lot of satisfaction, and it's a part of their identity. So you don't want to lose that and create this crisis for yourself because you went too far. And that would be the warning I would give people. And that's what I say to a lot of folks, that there is a point where your Ironman training becomes unhealthy. And it's like, if this costs you your overall training, I don't care if you win your age group this year, it's totally not worth it. You got to back off and try and figure out a viable strategy, because there's a lot of people that are using exercise to manage other issues that they have going on in their life mentally. And so you got to help them keep training, because it's they can get into a downward spiral without the outlet and the positive neurochemical benefits that they receive from their daily endurance training.
I guess it's a fine line, and you have to, get out a piece of paper and answer a bunch of questions honestly, such as, is this massive amount of extra muscle mass enhancing your life, or are you dedicating an extraordinary amount of time and mental anguish to the ups and downs of your training schedule? And if you're answering the wrong way, it's going to compromise your present health as well as your longevity. But I'm often reflecting on, like, who's going to win the longevity contest? Is it going to be a monk shuffling through the garden and meditating for hours a day and eating a little serving of brown rice and lentil soup at nighttime? Or is it going to be some jacked guy or relatively jacked guy who can also hike for 4 hours, but can, throw around some heavy weights in the gym, and they're keeping this? And when they turn 70 and turn 80 and turn 90, it's kind of a fascinating challenge. But I also want to throw in, like, the person who's enjoying themselves, whatever they are doing, whether they're shuffling through the garden and meditating their asses off, or whether they're clanking around plates, if they absolutely love it and don't show these obvious signs of excess, like injury, maybe they're onto something.
Yeah. The game isn't won later. The game's being won right now.
Right.
It's important to remember that there is no later. So that's a lesson from athletics. My personal best times, they're nothing. They're times, they're moments. What sticks with me actually from the whole process is the relationships and the experiences and the habits that I was able to build in this lifestyle, in this endurance lifestyle. And I think that would be, so if you catch yourself, it's that whole "I'll be happy when," or "I'll be satisfied when." Well, write that down and pay attention, because it's usually a trap. There's a part of your mind that's playing a trick on you, and what that part of the mind is doing is convincing you that it's later where you're going to need to be satisfied, or you will be satisfied. You're probably not going to be satisfied. I would say play a game where day in, day out, you're winning most of the time. And there will be
Mm,
times when it's not much fun. It's a little difficult, or maybe you got to go do a run or a ride in the rain, or it's cold. But you can get through those times. But if day in, day out, it's a slog and it's a grind and you're feeling stressed out, that's not winning. And that I think that was probably why I was able to ramp up so quick with the endurance, is I just loved it. It was really enjoyable. I latched onto this life that was a lot of fun for me and very rewarding. If it doesn't feel that way, and what I tell people, if
mm,
it doesn't feel that way, well, first off, you're probably going too intense. I think
mm,
a lot of people don't understand how enjoyable easy training can be. And if you're putting all this pace pressure and all this other stuff on yourself to go faster and more intense, well, just back off and enjoy it. I mean, I started by walking and hiking and then doing like multi-day treks, and eventually that led into mountaineering. But it was a really gradual ramp up, with a lot of easy training, very enjoyable, mixed with strength training. I've always liked to lift weights. I've done it since high school.
mm. You talk about this in the refrain of shifting from a high consumption lifestyle in your youth and working hard on this goal of minimalism or efficient distribution of your assets, not only financial but time, and how those kind of weave together. So maybe we should get some insights on that too, as one of your favorite subjects.
Yeah, the well, time is the ultimate asset. And what I recommend people do if they want to do a personal inventory of how much wealth they have, is actually take a look at where they're spending their time. And then also consider their wealth in terms of time. So let's talk about those as two different things. First thing is just have a look at your week. Where are you? What are you doing? Who are you with? How are you spending your time? Because I found that I was working a job that I was good at, and and I was putting a lot of time into it, a lot of energy into it, a lot of
Mm,
travel into it, but it wasn't where I wanted to be. And I realized that even though they were paying me a lot of money and I was good at it and I enjoyed it, fundamentally I was somewhere I didn't want to be. And so I needed to go somewhere else. And that my time inventory, because I was always thinking about, I'd be looking out the window
mm,
at work, and I'd be like, I want to be out there. I don't want to be in here. I want to be
mm.
outside. And so I stuck with that. So that's the time part of it. And an interesting point there was I didn't know where I wanted to go or what I wanted to do. I just knew that the only thing I was certain about was I wasn't in the right spot. So then I had to try some different things to figure out where I would fit in. And first I went to Australia, but it wasn't as good a fit as when I ended up over in New Zealand. The other thing is money. Um, when you're a big spender, you're much less wealthy than you think. So an example I use is you've got a net worth of $1 million. Now that seems like a lot of money, but if you're spending $250,000 a year, your net worth is 4 years. 1 million divided by 250,000 is 4 years. So if you look at your net worth in terms of time, that can give you a better view in terms of what your spending is actually doing to your freedom, your time. And if you have the ability to live a less expensive lifestyle, doesn't necessarily need to be minimalist lifestyle. It's really more your spending is focused where you want to, not necessarily all this other stuff, big house, cars, fancy vacations. You can cut that. And so when I left Hong Kong, I cut my expenses. My net worth didn't change. It was the same, but my wealth in time went way up because my expenses went down by so much. And what that time gave me was the ability to try different things.
Mm.
I realized that although I had a year off, I wasn't under pressure anymore because all of a sudden I knew I could live for a decade off my current balance sheet. And so it completely took the pressure off me. I could develop a coaching business. All I had to do was manage my expenses, and I had this time. So what you give yourself is you try and give yourself time. And with young people, I say, well, what are we shooting for here? I say you want to get to the point where you can give yourself 5 years, because an active young person that's motivated and willing to work, 5 years is a lot of time. So you want to get your assets minus your liabilities, that's your net worth, divided by your current spending, get that to about 5 years, and you've got tremendous flexibility. You don't have to stay in a job that you don't like. You have the ability to go work part-time for 1 or 2 years, and then have a side project where you start up. I started up a financial business when I was an elite athlete with a friend, and it was a part-time thing. And I helped him start it up. I used my skills. He used his time. He was the CEO. But I was able to do that because I was not working full-time on something else. So it opens up all these other opportunities which are invisible to you when you're in full-time employment, living that kind of hard charging lifestyle where you're spending money all the time telling yourself you're happy because you're going on these fancy vacations. But, I mean, both you and I know, a lot of athletes are basically on a permanent vacation. It can be a lifestyle. Being an elite athlete, you could be a lifestyle athlete, not necessarily a high performance athlete. You're just doing it because you like the life and you're passing time. So something to think about. That's how I approached it. I was always focused on buying myself time rather than just building up assets and spending.
It seems like the statistics are pretty bad here in terms of the huge percentage of the population is living paycheck to paycheck. Their net worth is a month or some incredibly short duration period where they'd be screwed if they weren't slaving away just trying to stay above water. And I know a lot of that's on the individual and their discretionary purchases, but there's some pretty big hurdles to overcome when you look at like the average housing cost in Los Angeles County is so high that the affordability to purchase a home rather than rent, and the rents are out of control. And it seems like, and I hear this from young people too, that they feel like their back's against the wall because just getting a routine career going is going to eat up so much of their income just to live and eat and then go back to their job.
Yeah, these are real issues facing a lot of people. I rented a room for many years, and I didn't buy a house until I moved to New Zealand, and then I bought a 5-bedroom house for 110,000 US because the Kiwi dollar was blown out. So I saved my money from 16 to 40. I saved 50 cents of every dollar I earned, and completely changed my life. So it can be done. When you're young, you don't miss the money you don't spend. I would say this is why you want to help. You want to model exceptional work ethic to your children, so they just get used to doing stuff and enjoying working. I always enjoyed working. I enjoyed working in the corporate world. I enjoyed working as an athlete. I enjoy working now. And that's just the way it is. You want to train yourself so that you want to be active, want to be doing stuff, want to be productive. And I think it's doable. I think it is challenging. I also think that a lot of our spending and a lot of our goals come from the environment that we put ourselves in. And but one of the best things I ever did, my early career was in London and Hong Kong. And those are two cities where it's a lot of fun to hang out if you're rich, and people that are rich with capital they didn't earn turn up there. So you have all these people around you all the time. And I still find those environments very difficult. They trigger envy in me, and they're not a good place for me to be. So I went out of that environment to one of the most grounded environments in the whole world, which is the South Island of New Zealand. The people down there understand the relationship between work and progress, and they understand they can't have it all. And it was just a great environment to be in. I put myself in a different environment. And there's challenges to being in Boulder. seems like everybody's my kids. It's like everybody's parents is an Olympian. It can feel like sometimes, you know. So you have this, it's like, oh, your dad's fit, but did he medal? Yeah, sure, he went to the games. I mean, it's a bit like that,
Yeah.
and it's a different environment. But on balance, no place is perfect. Every place has its pluses and minuses. It's fun to be here,
What's that
and
movie where the kids, had career day, and then the father comes in to talk about their job, so you're going to the local Boulder Elementary School, and here
oh
comes a
yeah,
gold medalist from this sport, and then, oh my
oh
goodness.
yeah, you go to the cross country meet. It's like, oh, there's an Olympian there, and another one
Uh,
over there, and I think she medaled. And yeah,
yeah.
it's just the environment, and it's a fun environment. It's a healthy environment.
Hmm.
The kids are active, and you got to keep them grounded at home because there's always, there's we got kids in town that are doing 50, 60-mile weeks, and there's kids doing big volume, and you just have to say, well, look, sorry, you're a kid
Mm.
and you're not doing that much. You have to, you got to model a bit the being sensible at home, and not get wrapped up in the volume game before you're even out of high school, or in some cases even out of middle school. These the parents that know do a good job of keeping the kids balanced. I think it's some of the parents that get a little wrapped up in the environment that can overdo it on the kids. And that's an interesting thing for the parents listening, is that we all tend to pass our unfinished business to our children. The aspirations that we weren't able to achieve, we can tend to pass that along to them. So I try and make my kids aware of what I've done, but they're like, "Yeah, Dad, no, it didn't come from you. I really feel that way." And I was like,
Mm.
"Okay, well, maybe you do." But we have a tendency, and so you have to kind of keep an eye on the family in that sense, that you don't push a kid towards something where maybe might not be the best direction for them to go.
Yeah, and the cultural forces are really something that I became highly aware of as my kids were going through the age groups, and you realize that, um, like in the case of my son, this little guy who loved playing basketball, and pretty soon the level of competition in the local community league didn't match his level of intensity, and so I had to, bite my tongue and swallow hard and go join up with the AAU system, which is widely regarded just like in other sports like swimming, and it's super high caliber and high pressure, whatever it is, tennis or the junior golf circuit or whatever, where they're developing these young athletes at such an age. But if you don't kind of tap into the level of opportunity, then literally you're going to get the athletes are going to get left behind because the acceleration is so crazy, and it's a hard thing to kind of stay with your values and your belief systems, that little middle school athletes shouldn't be pushed to the brink with 4 hours a day practice. But I hear this all the time from parents who seem to be walking in with, high ideals and a healthy perspective, but, succumbing to the incredible pressure and the energy. Same with college application. I mean, it's known if you receive a B on your report card at any time in high school, you're not going to get admitted to the most elite schools. There's just no fooling around. Even in 10th grade Spanish class, when you were chewing bubblegum and drawing pictures instead of paying attention, you just lost your chance to get into UC Berkeley. It's pretty heavy insight.
Yeah, that's a cultural phenomenon in the United States. The uh, overemphasis on college, and
Mm.
the overemphasis on athletics.
Boy, it hasn't helped us in the World Cup soccer, though, Gordo. I mean, if it's the soccer tryouts are so high pressure, and the traveling team and the gold team and the silver team, but wait a second, how come we're getting our butt kicked by Trinidad still?
I so it, I think you need to decide as a family what your
Mm.
definition of success is, and not let other people tell you what being successful is. And I had to think this stuff through. So for myself, around the time of my 30th birthday, how am I going to define success? What is it? And then 12 years later, young family, got to think it through again.
Mm,
What is successful? How are we going to define it? And yeah, and when I talk about knowing the game you're playing, define your own game. Don't let your culture define the game that you and your family want to be playing. I would also say that if you dig deeper and you really want to give your child the opportunity to be a great athlete, you will discover that you do not have positive control. You cannot make a child a champion. All you have is negative control. You can screw
mm,
them up. So your only ability is to wreck the situation. And when you embrace that, you will realize that, well, ultimately, it's all I'm trying to do is equip this child and then this teen with a toolbox of skills and experiences and a work ethic. And then they will be released into the world. And this will happen way before high school because you can't control their effort at practice. It needs to be coming from within them. And you can drive them to practice, you can make them practice, you can make them do doubles, but you can't make them train. And we already see this around 14, 15 in swimming. Kids have been at it for a long time. They're not really into it that much. Parents won't let
mm,
them out. They've checked out, and that's it. So they've leveled out, and that's it. And that's a really tough thing for a kid to have to deal with in their teens, in high school, when they got all this other stuff going on in their social life. They're trying to figure out who they are in the larger world. So these high pressure parents are actually setting their children up for failure, not for success, because you have to give the child room to grow at every level. And then when they're an adult, they will have the ability, if they want, to take
mm,
themselves to the next level in an area that they want to take themselves. And I think this is really important to remember if you have very high goals for your children. And my goal is not to limit them. My goal isn't for them to do anything, it's to have them do. And if I got a president of the United States and a gold medalist and a CEO living in the house, I don't want to limit where they can take themselves. But I don't really care about pushing them. I just want to
mm,
be that I want them to be at grade level. And I think as a society, we waste a tremendous amount of resources on big name sports and the
mm,
college education system. And the only way we were able to do that is by the amount of money that we put in by consuming the products, and the government puts in by subsidizing debt and subsidizing the whole system, and the cities put in with the stadiums and all this. But
mm.
that's a cultural decision. I don't have to play that game with my family. I can be aware of it and make my kids aware of it, and then praise them on the things that I value and I believe.
Mm. And see where that goes. And one of my great reflections or insights is that I had far less influence than I thought I did throughout the various years of parenting young people. And so you get really wrapped up trying to do everything the right way, and then you realize that they're their own creatures and they're going to follow their own path, even if you make the perfect speech or show them the perfect environment. And so that kind of takes some pressure off the parents, I think.
Yeah, they're always watching. They don't really care what I say, although they'll be
Mm,
polite and listen to me. They just want to know what I do.
mm,
So my actions, my choices, you know, um, my decision to exercise every morning, my decision not to drink alcohol, my decision not to smoke, my decision to eat salads and vegetables and healthy is what is teaching them, not what I'm talking about. It's they are learning from what I do. They're learning from how I treat them, how I treat every person that they see me interact with, and
mm,
most importantly, how I treat their mother.
mm.
That is probably the central relationship education that they get is via my marriage, in terms of seeing how that works, what a healthy relationship looks like, how we problem solve, what happens when we disagree, all that kind of stuff. They just pick up by living it.
No matter what, no matter how hard you try, your actions are going to be way stronger than your words. Freakonomics takes it even a step further, saying who you are is more important than what you do, and all the research showing that, you know, if being a child of college-educated parents is going to have an imprint, even if there's no books in the house and they never get read to by their college-educated parents. Pretty mind-blowing, but I think the actions are the biggest impact. Well, before we wrap up, I want to go back to one thing when you mentioned that today, to win the Ironman in Hawaii, you have to be dropping a 7:35, and it's sort of mind-blowing to realize, for example, in our era, how hard we worked, how hard we trained, how talented the top athletes were. Scott Molina, your longtime training buddy, was very high performing swimming and running as a youngster in the school years, and then, you know, a beast on the bike, riding these incredible mileage and putting up these amazing performances. And of course, we're going to expect that performances escalate over time. And I know we have some outside variables, such as the improved bicycle that cuts through the wind better. But what are some other things that you think are at play? And you're allowed to say doping and microdosing with products that help you, but don't that evade detection, because it is quite amazing to see, you know, from my own reference point, how fast everything has become in recent years.
Well, if I look at you know, the beautiful thing now is we've got all the data. We can look on Strava. We can look at the power files. We even have like aerodynamic data. We have computer models where you can feed in a picture of the bike setup, and we can really dig into all that. When you start looking at the physiology, it doesn't look totally crazy to me in an Ironman sense. And honestly, until they figure out how to dope fat oxidation, and, you know, if somebody comes up with a drug that can triple your fat oxidation during an Ironman, we're going to see some people go really fast, right? Because it's an energy equation. You're energy constrained in terms of the uptake. So when I look at the training programs, when I look at the performances, when I think back to my own best performances, my own best physiology, I had a very good physiology at my peak for Ironman racing. And I look at that and then I consider, well, I was in my 30s and I came up off the couch. And so I had, so if we think, so I'm starting, so some of these athletes probably have a cumulative training load of an extra 10,000 hours in terms of where I was. Then it's entirely conceivable that someone can go that fast. So it's not like you know, it's not like pro cycling when they put the leader table up and of the best climbs in France, the best times in France, and everybody on there that's retired was caught for doping, and then the current guys are all mixed in there and they haven't been caught. It's the, you know, when they do that table, you're kind of like, you know, that just doesn't look very legit to me, because everybody else that's retired was busted. When I look at these Ironman times, they look absolutely feasible to me. And so there's nothing where I say, oh, that's totally outlandish. But the other thing is, with this whole, there's things that happen in professional sport, all professional sports, that are different than what's going on in elite sport or high performance sport. So, you know, it's personally, it's a game I decided not to play. I didn't want to go that professional route. I was much more comfortable just being an elite and making it about how good I could be relative to the amount that I was willing to put into it. And that would be my recommendation for people. Are some people lousy partners? Are they not necessarily some of the nicest people in the world? Sure, but it's like that everywhere. And are people bending rules and cutting corners? Yeah, that happens too. But we knew that already. The times themselves don't look particularly ridiculous to me. They look legit. I mean, it's pretty impressive that they can do it. I mean, if you think about our era, if you think about how fast people went for a half Ironman distance, the best athletes, and then just double it, you know, you're getting pretty close to how fast everybody's going. They've just figured out a way to take that physiology and make it, it doesn't have to last twice as long because everything's kind of gotten a little bit quicker, but it's having to last maybe 75% as long. And it looks reasonable to me. It's pretty impressive. Now, the other thing that's interesting to me is and this has been gradual over 25 years, is the depth
Mm.
of the athletes. And what we're seeing is the Olympic movement, including triathlon in the Olympics, brought a lot of expertise and a lot of talent into triathlon, chasing that Olympic dream. And as we see those athletes move out, so that the first one, now we're like on the third and fourth wave of those athletes, and they've tended to go short and then go long. But what we're seeing now is better athletes at their prime going long, and we're seeing times drop, and we're seeing a lot more depth in the fields. And I think they're going to go even quicker, because if you look at how competitive the Olympic distance racing is, and if you took that pool of athletes and you turn them loose on nothing but Ironman, they're going to figure out how to go faster. Likewise, I would love to see a world-class athlete do an Ultraman distance and see just how fast somebody could go over that distance. I think we would all be blown away. I think it's possible to go really, really fast with the right preparation and the right athlete doing it. I think
it's like Western states, when I used to live
There
at
you
the
go.
finish line in
Ultra running.
Auburn. And, Ann Trayson got second overall one year, which is one of the greatest female performances ever to be in the best race. But, then these guys who are now full-time elite performing professional ultra runners can go knock 3 hours off the previous record times because they're living and breathing training. Where Tim Tweetwire, my buddy who won 6 times, he was an engineer at HP working a 40-hour week and running at lunchtime. So that's pretty obvious how that escalation occurs. But and speaking of fat oxidation, when I look at Blumenfeld, who has a larger frame for an elite endurance athlete and Ironman champion, it seems like he could be burning through carbs the entire race in order to run that fast off the bike. And something's maybe changed from even the basic physiology insights that we have, that you have to get better and better at burning fat and preserving glycogen.
He's a high volume guy. I think his data is going to come out in due course, and it'll be great to see. We're going to learn a lot from studying that Norwegian approach over the years to come. When I see those athletes and I see the training they can do, I really feel like I was probably definitely 1 kilo too light, but maybe 2 kilos too light. I had some great races down in New Zealand when I was racing heavy, and my bike power was phenomenal. And by power, I mean my aerobic power. So I could just ride really strong for a long time. I did, at that larger size, if it was a hot day running, I did struggle a bit. When I was leaner, I ran great in the heat. But I think, they're very sophisticated in their approach to heat and volume and fueling. And, Scott Molina has a great saying, and it's like, if it was all just about getting super light, they'd have a scale instead of a finish line. So it's it's a multivariable problem that you got to try and optimize and figure out. And I think the Norwegians do a great job of that, and I'm really looking forward to learning from them in the years to come.
Gordo, we have gone across the board, man. It's always a pleasure to connect with you and listen to your insights on so many things. And speaking of that, please explain how we can connect with your wonderful blog writings and the new format in 2023, even for people who are old-time readers.
Okay. So 1000daypacing.com. It's just a simple landing page, and it's 1000 daypacing.com. On that page, you can see it'll take you to Twitter, it'll take you to my YouTube channel, and there's 2 publications that I write. One's called Endurance Essentials, which covers all the athletic stuff that we've been touching on. And then for the family and money stuff, what I found was my readership didn't like me mixing it on my blog. So I started another Substack that's called True Wealth.
Hmm.
And that one covers family, finances, and the lessons that I've had over the 30 plus years I've been watching and working for the wealthy. And that's really what that one's about.
I kind of liked when you mixed it all in, but I get it. I get it. Okay, we're gonna have to sign up for two things now. I don't want you to don't just pick one or the other. It's all in with Gordo. So we're gonna go sign up for both of those. Great regular content, and you work so hard to put together a short and memorable passages. Which, remember that Mark Twain quote? He said, "I was going to write you a shorter letter, but I didn't have time." That's how he started a letter to a friend. And so I appreciate your effort so much, and thanks for spending the time today. Thanks for listening, everybody, to Gordo Byrn.
Thank you.
Say the website again: 1000.
1000daypacing.com.
1000daypacing.com. All right, everybody. Dun, dun, dun.